Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller with you. We have a second-time guest, actually, an attorney here in Dakota County, here in Eagan, as a matter of fact, Jeff Sheridan, who is running for the Dakota County Attorney's Office.
Thanks
Jeff,
for having me back.
Oh, pleasure to have you back. You have won just about every recognition that an attorney can have. AV on Martindale-Hubbell, top 10 attorneys, I think, certainly in this county, national recognition, etc. Why do you want to give all that up to become the Dakota County Attorney?
Well, to be honest, Alan, the thought came to me as I was meeting with my financial planner, who kept asking me, why are you still working, and encouraging me to retire. And I was thinking about that, and the more I thought about it, the more I thought, you know, I've been complaining about the Dakota County Attorney's Office for the last 35 years that I've been practicing here in Dakota County. And I thought, you know what, I can keep throwing stones from the sidelines, or I could step up and say, look, I've got more to give. This community has been just overly generous with me over the course of 35 years, and I think it's time I give something back if I can, so I'm going to try.
Well, let's talk about that. You say you've been throwing stones at them. What's your complaint with the Dakota County Attorney's Office? And we have a new county attorney now. Kathy Keena's only in for a short time. Right. Her predecessor, Jim, certainly was there for forever and ever. And
she's the hand-picked successor by Jim to continue with his policies. So there's not a lot of daylight between what's been going on for the last 35 years and what's going on today. And so there was a little lag there where I got to see whether things were going to change, there was going to be a dramatic refocus. And clearly there's not. This is just more of the same of what we've been dealing with. So, I mean, in answer to your first question. Which
is what?
Right, and I guess that's the real focus of my whole campaign. And I'm not a big guy on slogans, but when people talk about getting tough on crime and lock them up and throw away the key, it's easy to utter a slogan, but the fact of the matter is that we don't throw away the key. Right? Nobody, an overwhelming majority of all the people who go through our criminal justice system are either going to remain in or return to the community in which they offended. And until we start focusing on the way in which people come back to us, do they come back with the mindset and the tools to be successful so that they can proceed in life in a pro-social way? Or do we so deprive them of all of the tools that they would need to be successful that they have to turn to reoffending. So my problem with the county attorney's office is that their focus has always been on the banging of the gavel at the end of the case. Once the judge has imposed the sentence, poof, it's gone from their minds, right? There's no more services for the victims. There's no more thought about what happens next. And until we focus and continue to focus on asking ourselves the question, and then what, we're never going to make any strides toward true public safety.
In other words, you want to get people out of the jail and back into society
In a successful way.
Right, as successful citizens.
Yep.
As law-abiding citizens.
Yep.
And what's required to do that?
Well, two things. I mean, first of all, we need to focus on the front end, right? So we need to find the programs that deal with at-risk youth, identifying and trying to find ways, summer job programs, whatever it is, on the front end to keep people from ever entering the system in the first place. But for those who fail, right, who end up on the pointy end of the criminal legal system, we need to focus on how to make sure this is your last trip, right? And if we're not thinking about that, right, is we look at this case, at this human, and ask ourselves, what is it that this guy needs to make sure that today, standing in front of the judge, will be the last time that this guy ever has to stand in front of a judge? That needs to be our focus, singular
there
focus.
are educational opportunities through the jail.
Sure.
They have programs in the jail for people to
And that's awesome.
get a GED or whatever is required, or even beyond that.
Yeah.
But you're talking about from the day that sentence is imposed, if they don't go back to jail, you're talking about?
I'm talking about long before the sentence is imposed. How do we fashion a sentence? What is the best way for us to deal with this person and see to it that when they come out, when their probation is over, when their prison sentence is over, when their jail time is over, whatever their sentence looks like, how do we guarantee that this is the last time they're going to be here? And we may not succeed in every single case, and I suspect we won't. But the ideal prosecutor, the North Star of an ideal prosecutor's work should be, I would love to work myself out of a job. I would love to be so successful in my keeping people out of the system in the first place, and then be so successful in making sure that those who do land here never come back, that I've run out of work. And if that's not your North Star, if that isn't your goal, then you shouldn't be in the job.
We have an interesting juxtaposition here between you and Kathy Keena. Kathy has always been a prosecutor.
Yep.
You have always been for the defense. Now we have two other candidates, one from Ramsey County, who has always been a prosecutor, not that well known in Dakota County, and a former state senator who, as I look at it, has very little criminal experience.
Yep.
You, on the other hand, have 35 years. Kathy has certainly
Close to that.
decades
Yep.
of experience. What's the difference here?
Well, from my perspective, and it's the prism that we look through. If you are a career prosecutor, if you have never represented a human being who's trying to keep the worst, having the rest of their lives defined by the worst day in it, which is almost universally true for people in the criminal justice system. It's not universally true. There are lots of career offenders out there, but they make up a tiny percentage of what actually goes on in the courthouse. And if you have not stood in front of a judge, negotiated with a prosecutor from the perspective of, look, this is a human being who made this mistake, and we're trying our best to keep this day from defining the rest of their lives, that's the prism I have always looked through. On the other side of that is a prosecutor who's never represented a human being in that situation. And so there's just the different approach to things as a problem-solving approach, right? That's my goal is to solve the problem, not to close the file. I'm not looking at the quick outcome, the banging of the gavel that allows me to write closed on the outside of my file. Because at that point, from my perspective, these people are clients forever. I mean, I represent people, or I deal with people who've been with me for 30 plus years. So they're members they are a part of my sphere, and you just can't treat people like they're a commodity.
And some of those people came to you in the worst of situations.
Almost all of them.
Certainly charged with crimes.
Yeah.
And you have applied this technique that you have, or these beliefs that you have, to keep these people out of trouble in the future. Would you say that you've been uniformly successful in that?
Every once in a while, and I'm not afraid to say that, me getting somebody completely out of a crime does tend to suggest that they might reoffend because, hey, I've got this lawyer Sheridan, he gets me out of things. So that happens, but by and large, you had their attention from the jump, right? I mean, these are people who got caught up in a situation that they didn't need a judge to tell them they were being naughty and they need to not do this again. They didn't need a prosecutor to tell them they were naughty and didn't need to do this again. They knew it in the moment. And so that's why so the lesson was learned maybe even before they came to see me, let alone by the time the gavel bangs at the end of the case. So humans, by and large, are not bad. They don't tend to badness. And again, there are exceptions, but it's about learning lessons and moving forward.
You have tried cases in all the courts of Minnesota.
Well, not every courthouse, but yes, at all levels of court.
At all levels,
Yep.
and certainly appeals at all levels. Oh, yeah. And I don't know if you've gone beyond that to the U.S. Supreme Court.
I have. Twice, successfully.
So that says something. What kind of a burden would it be for a person who has little or no experience as a trial lawyer, as a criminal lawyer, and we have one such candidate here, to step into this? I'm not even talking about the civil side. We'll talk about the civil side.
Yeah.
But someone who's not familiar with it, just to step into it.
Well, the Dakota County Attorney's Office, for starters, is the biggest law firm in Dakota County. So, I mean, there are close to 50 lawyers in that office, more than 100 employees in that office. So, for starters, if you walk in there with no managerial experience or at least some gravitas, you'll get eaten alive. I mean, basically, the managers in the office will end up, the tail will wag the dog, and whether you have good policy ideas or not, you're never going to get anywhere with them because the management will eat you alive. I mean, if you came into the office with that kind of experience, we could look forward to more of the same for many more years to come.
So, I mean, that's something that actually should be a consideration for the voters.
I hope I'm promoting to everyone that this is a really, really important job. It is the chief law enforcement job in Dakota County. The most serious of all cases come through this office. It is a really important job, and it is so important for the voters to educate themselves about each of the people who is seeking this office and decide for themselves who they think is actually capable of doing the job.
Now, a portion of the county attorney's office is also civil. Mm-hmm. So how do you approach that?
Well, I will tell you that I've been doing this for 35 years, and in the 35 years that I've been doing it, I have not only defended people charged with crimes, but I was the public defender for paternity cases in Dakota County. I was the public defender for child support contempt cases in Dakota County. I was the public defender for civil commitments for mental health and chemical dependency issues in Dakota County. There are very few things that the county prosecutes that I haven't had experience with again, always on the opposite side of it, but I've done all of those cases.
Well, what about on the civil side? The county attorney has a lot
Those
of
are
duties.
all civil cases, the ones I just mentioned, but civil forfeiture
That's what I
actions.
wanted to point out.
Yeah, civil forfeitures. I mean, my clients who are accused of crimes are also being, their property is being taken from them. I have been, frankly, most of the cases in my first 5 years of practice were civil cases. The stuff I have in the Minnesota appellate courts, the Supreme Court, were civil cases.
Well, one of the things that certainly has been a problem, I don't think it's a problem in the country, but the allegations are a problem. We've heard the allegations of voter fraud, which is non-existent. We've had 60-some federal cases. I think the only case that I've heard recently is the former president's chief of staff, who was guilty of voter fraud, and there's a couple others. What can county attorneys do to make sure that we're free of voter fraud?
Well, one of the things you do is have a great, robust electoral system, and we do. That we have paper ballots to trace, so we use computerized vote counting by feeding the paper ballot into it, but our paper ballot system is excellent, and anyone who's gone paperless should take a look at Minnesota and go back to the paper ballot. But it's funny you should mention this. One of the prosecutors have something called prosecutorial discretion, which means they don't have to prosecute cases. They choose not to prosecute for all sorts of reasons. I mean, we have sodomy laws on our books that haven't been enforced in forever. Okay, so a prosecutor has discretion, but there is one place where they have none, and that is in cases of voting irregularities. The prosecutor can be removed from office in Minnesota. A county attorney can be removed from office in Minnesota if they do not prosecute every vote fraud case that comes across their desk. And how many happened at the end of the 2020 election? How many prosecutions in Minnesota?
Zero.
Zero. So these guys, everybody who's a county attorney, their job is literally on the line if they don't prosecute them, and they found zero voter fraud in Minnesota.
We have the highest voting percentage generally. We have one of the most powerful secretaries of state, and that certainly helps a lot in that regard. What can the county attorney do to promote public safety?
From my perspective, public safety is not something that can be imposed on a population. You cannot jail your way to public safety. Public safety is a byproduct of success in the community. So when, again, if people come out of jail and they have housing, they have employment, humans are incredibly good at survival. And if we give people legitimate ways to survive, to support their families, to feed their children, they will pursue those. That's human nature. But if you take away the legitimate ways to pursue that, it doesn't mean they're going to let their kids starve, okay? They will find the way. Our job, if we truly care about public safety, is to help everyone else find a job. Find a way to legitimately support themselves and their families, and they'll be too busy supporting themselves and their family to find time for all of the other nonsense that happens in the world. Public safety is a product of community prosperity. When everybody has an opportunity and they have take advantage of that opportunity, public safety is the outcome. It is not something we can impose in any way.
Now, one of the real problems of our society, of course, is that the minority population is severely prejudiced, education-wise, housing-wise, job-wise, otherwise. And, notwithstanding the fact that the Chief Justice of the United States in I guess 5 years ago or whatever it was, said that there wasn't racial discrimination under the Voting Rights Act. I think he was wrong, and I think that it has been, it surfaces constantly. It surfaced again with Ketanji Brown Jackson recently, where you saw senators who had voted for her in 2 previous judicial appointments suddenly voting against her. Reprehensible. I just blogged about it yesterday, as a matter of fact. I thought it was reprehensible for them not to applaud her selection and to walk out of the room, which is really insulting. What can we do in terms of racial animus to make it better?
You know, it's probably hard for me. I look through a prism of my own life, as we all do, and I have moved effortlessly through my life. I was born white and male in the United States of America. Basically, I was born on third base. The difference is that I know I didn't hit a triple because I had nothing to do with those 3 things that put me on third base. Right? Those all happened through the grace of whatever brought me to the world on this particular day and in this particular place. The most important thing for us, right, for the white males born in the United States of America, is to stand up and say, I acknowledge that I am the beneficiary of the greatest affirmative action program in the history of the world, and I therefore owe a responsibility back to at least say out loud, I recognize that my effortless walk through the world was not the product of me being a good person or a great person or a smart person or anything else. We all need to take stock of that, and every single day, and stop pretending like that is the life experience of everyone in this country, because it clearly isn't.
Now we're running down on time, but I do want to ask you, how can we put more teeth in protective orders? Protective orders just seem to be ignored in so many cases, and we see violence as a result of people who violate protective orders. What can be done, not necessarily by a county attorney, but to protect people more in that regard?
Well, I think there needs to be a culture of accountability in that world, right? I mean, there are all sorts of things, all sorts of ideas I have about how we got here, what it is that has brought the level of violence and domestic violence in particular to our communities. And I have lots of ideas about what to do about that. But in terms of what I can do on day one as a prosecuting attorney is ensure everyone that that's a priority for me. The hard fact is that a piece of paper is not going to stop a bullet, right? So if somebody who's bound and determined to violate a protective order, the order itself is nothing more than a piece of paper. But the culture surrounding that piece of paper, whether police care, whether prosecutors care, whether these things get pursued with any sort of vigor, that is something that a county attorney can control. And I pledge to the citizens of Dakota County.
How about much more severe penalties for violation of a protective order?
The maximum penalties are things that get set by the legislature.
Right.
But what penalty fits this particular offense on this day, that's something that we have to leave to judges. I am not a fan of mandatory minimum sentences. They are abused in ways that they were never thought of, right? So the legislators are all sitting around thinking of the worst case scenario, and then the violation of the order for protection is a text message from one embittered party to the other saying thanks a lot, right? I mean, that's the text. Yeah. That's a violation of the protective order, and if you've got mandatory minimums in place, sending a text could land you in prison. So I'm not a fan of mandatory minimum sentences. I think every case needs to be looked at on its own facts. But the culture is something that the prosecutor can control.
Much more to talk about. No time left to talk. We've been talking with Jeff Sheridan, a distinguished attorney running for Dakota County Attorney, and we'll see you again before the election.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.